Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Tips and Tricks webinar. Today's topic, as you can see, is configuring identity providers with Smart One Cloud. Please use the Q&A chat if you have any questions. We'll make sure we get to those during the webinar. Our presenter today is an SE from Maryland, Mike Asher. Mike, welcome. What do you have for us today?
Thank you. Actually, I have an error in my subject. It really should be Infinity Portal because this ties to more overall permissions entering the portal and services rather than specifically Smart One Cloud. I'm going to kind of discuss a little bit about identity providers, SAML. We have quite a few supported out-of-the-box services within Infinity Portal for SSO and SAML authentication. Most of them, kind of everybody is heard of, but there are a lot of, open source and smaller cloud services that are out there that maybe companies maybe, that customers may be interested in using rather than just kind of the big names that are out there. So I'm going to discuss about what's an identity provider, who we currently support, and then give a brief little demo and kind of how you troubleshoot it a little bit. And so I'll just kind of jump right in and talk about what is an identity provider. It's a system that manages user identities. You're probably most familiar with things like Radius and Active Directory and LDAP and services like that. But the identity providers we talk about are using SAML assertions, and SAML stands for Security Assertion Markup Language. If you decode a SAML request, I believe it's base 64, but you'll see that the format structure is XML. And so within that, you will see things such as the requesting service, signatures for like certificate signatures for the identity provider. The cloud service typically that you're using you can have some encryption keys between that. You will see that in there, as well as the assertions like what is your name, what groups are you involved in, perhaps your email address and user ID and whatever other service information is needed to verify to the cloud service who you say you are. And I touched on this a minute ago, but some examples of identity providers are Okta, Duo, Ping, Microsoft, ADFS, or Intra ID, or I don't know. I think they've renamed it again, but what they call their identity services in the cloud. So within Infinity Portal, we have quite a few options that are available. We have the Microsoft Azure AD, Okta, and Duo. And then Ping has a couple of service options, Ping Identity and Ping Federate. We have integrations with Google Workspace, ADFS, Radius, and then the one I'm going to talk about is generic SAML server. And so let me go back. In this case, for the generic SAML server, there are quite a few open source tools, such as Keycloak or Keycloak's the only one I can think of right off the top of my head, that customers can potentially host on their own if they're not necessarily interested in tying into some of the big names or even tying directly into Active Directory. But there's also some smaller cloud services. One of them I'm going to discuss in this example today is a company called Jump Cloud, and they are an SSO, an identity provider that is also cloud hosted. And as always, the documentation for Infinity Portal, just the admin guide will have the most up-to-date information about which single sign-on identity providers that we use or that we have integrations with from Infinity Portal. So, for this demo, I'm going to just kind of show, here's the Infinity portal. If for some of you may or may not have seen it. I have a self-hosted Keycloak identity access management service. It's an open source project found at keycloak.org. It's a web service that you can utilize and create your clients, your client scopes, your user identities. And then there is also, I mentioned just a minute ago, Jump Cloud is the other one. The primary reason I went with Jump Cloud is because they offer a free tier, and we don't have them as a supported, integration where you can just click on them and enter in the information directly. You have to use the generic SAML service option for that. So I'm going to switch my share to my web browser, and hopefully this will work the way that I want it to.
Demos are always fun.
All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is log into the Infinity portal.
Oh, wait, Mike, my screen's black. I don't see
All right,
anything.
so we're not sharing. Okay.
I see your mouse moving, but I know it's completely black.
All right. Well, then let me do a stop share and a reshare and see if that changes the. That doesn't work. I'll share my whole desktop and see rather than me sharing just the application. Is that any better?
Nope, same.
Desktop.
There we go.
All right. So that didn't interesting. So let me get logged into my Infinity portal. I'm currently logging in as my, primary admin account for my Infinity portal tenant. And so underneath that, you'll see my Smart One Cloud, but I also have an endpoint manager configured as well. So I have two different services under my Infinity portal tenant for demo. When you're going to configure your identity and access controls under your Infinity portal tenant, you'll just come to the settings up here in the gear and you go to identity and access. And so under there, you can define your SAML services, or in this case, if you were to do a new, you can see the services that we have available. Again, a lot of the big names in IDP, capabilities are here. But in this instance, I'm going into configure generic SAML. And once you configure a name, you will give the option to do two things. You have a login based on domain verification and a login with a unique URL. If you do the login based on domain verification, it requires that you create a text record in your DNS for that particular domain to be able to, so that the Infinity portal can verify you are who, your domain is, that you actually own it. For this particular example, I'm going to go back and just say log in with a unique URL. The only issue I could say here is that you actually have to remember or bookmark what this particular URL is. So if you're able to use a text record and validate your domain, then you can simply go to portal.checkpoint.com and put in, user@domain.com, and it will redirect you to your single sign-on service. And so looking at the unique URL, you will get some information that's given to you. You will get a unique UUID here and an entity ID that's required. This will be the part of the request that is sent to the single sign-on service, that this is who we are. This is where you need to return your response to. So when The single sign-on approves your authentication request, and you're logged into your SSO solution. It will send a redirect back to this endpoint with the following data: first name, last name, email address, the user groups, and then this particular value also that has to be delivered back to the to Infinity Portal. And so these are part of the client scope, and I'll touch on those just a minute from Keycloak because I have a very easy example for that. But this is the content that has to be delivered back to Infinity Portal for you to successfully sign in using SAML. And then when you move forward, what you will also ask for is something called configure metadata. Every SSO service has this metadata, and it depends on, each one is different in how the configuration. In Keycloak, they have what are called realms, and you will point out you have an option to download the information for the realm, and you will download that XML file, and you will import the XML file as a part of this. So if I were to open up this particular XML file, you'll see that it's just XML data. And if I can, with signature, all URLs for redirection, for passing the authentication request over to things like that. So it's location endpoints, the kind of the group settings that you need to pass along to it. And then you're able to run a test. And well, that's going to fail because I didn't finish this part. So I'm going to exit out of this piece and show kind of what I have. So I have two domains set up here. One of them is going to use the unique URL to log in, and the other one I will just go to portal.checkpoint.com, and each one uses a different single sign-on service. Just for a quick overview, even though this is for Keycloak, for example, the client information, so that particular field, that first entity ID, in Keycloak, that's where you will use the entity ID. And you will define it as, here's my client ID, here's the root of the request, here's the redirection URL. So that was also the other piece of information that the Infinity Portal gives you when you run through the wizard. And so from there, you have to define your client scope. Did I go to the right spot? I went to the wrong spot. Hold on. So I actually have an Infinity Portal scope here. So under my scope, go to Infinity Portal, and then you'll see my mappers that I have. And these are going to be specific. These are going to be different depending on the single sign-on solution. So just as an example, I've got my email address, a given name, surname. I added name in here because at one point several months ago, some of these were also added. I just haven't changed it. And then the user ID, which is that value, that SAML attribute that was configured there. So if you have these properly configured within your SSO provider, then you will be able to, these are the values that once you log in are sent back to Infinity Portal. And if I look at Jump Cloud is different because they call them applications. They don't call them clients. And so you would create, and what I've noticed, like Ping Identity also calls them applications. And so you configure your application very similarly, right? You've got your redirect URL. You have, in my opinion, Jump Cloud provides a much cleaner interface than Keycloak, right? You can easily put in the attributes that you want to send back. You can tag and say, I need to send groups, for example. It's a much faster, simpler way compared to what I went through trying to learn Keycloak. One thing we're talking about the metadata in Keycloak, when you're under your realm here, you can go to like realm settings, and then you will see identity provider metadata. That is the XML file that Infinity Portal is looking to see. And Keycloak, Jump Cloud also has that. I just can't remember where that is off the top of my head. So I'm going to skip that piece because I don't quite, oh, I do know where that is. Under SSO, you'll come up here and there is a export metadata literally at the top of the application configuration. And that's where you will get the information that Infinity Portal needs to redirect all that to Jump Cloud. So moving forward, I've created this. Oh, I almost forgot. Once you've created your identity providers, you have to go in and create a user group instead of user group, or maybe not just a set, whatever user groups you want to do. And so in this case, I've created two, and it actually asks you for the IDP ID. And this group name is what is received from the SAML server, from Keycloak, from Jump Cloud, from Azure AD, whatever. It doesn't matter. The response is all the same. This has to match what you're sending as a group ID. If it does not, then you will get a message that says you were successfully logged in, but you don't have any roles defined as a user. And you will have to go in and make sure that the group mapping or the group definition on your SAML service matches within your group definition here. And so otherwise you'll get an error, and Infinity Portal will tell you, you didn't pass us a role. We don't know who you are or what permissions you're actually supposed to have. So I'm going to log in, and I'm logging in with the first one. I might get a redirect here, hopefully. Cross my fingers. Perfect. This one is my Jump Cloud piece. So I'm logging into all right. So here's what I was talking about. I apparently didn't assign my user to a user group. So if you don't pass this is perfect. Great opportunity to practice troubleshooting. I have no role defined. So if I come back over here and find my user, I will see that I don't have, this is where the group naming is important, because I have an endpoint admins group, but it does not match the name of the group here. So just for, oops, just for testing purposes, we will see if I can, oh, I'll have to log out. We'll try that again. All right. So we'll come back to that and see if we can troubleshoot that in just a minute. Let me find one that works. So I'll go to my other account. And I don't know if you saw that. If you have multiple SSO services defined, it's a good idea to give them a name that means something like production or dev or maybe location, or maybe something that is useful so that if you do get in a situation where you have multiple identity providers, you can pick and choose and your end users will know exactly which environment. So in this case, I clicked on my one that's going to go to Keycloak. It automatically redirects me. I let Harmony Browse do its thing, make sure I'm not it's not a phishing site. I log in, it redirects. And then all of a sudden, I'm now, as a user, able to get into my Smart One Cloud tenant. And so if I come back here to my administrative user in Infinity Portal, what I will now see is that my MyClit for demo use only account is a member of the firewall admin group, and I only have access to security management. And if I come to Infinity Portal and I want to go to endpoint, because I have a demo for that, click on demo endpoint, I have no access to this. So in this instance, I've now successfully logged in using my SAML service to do this. So if I log out, let me sign out. I come back over here and I delete this user. And then come back here and let me get the right sign on page. Oops. Go back to my demo use only. I'll do this as a first time user. Users. And refresh my page. You will see now that it recreated my account within the Infinity Portal, and I still have access to, still only have access to Smart One Cloud in this instance. So that is really kind of the high level, quick and dirty way of doing SAML service. It doesn't go, I didn't go into detail about how to really configure the SSO side of the house because tools could be different. So let me go back and real quick and talk about troubleshooting and then go into questions. Did my share change, Rob?
Seeing the black screen again, Mike.
Ah. Love technology sometimes.
There you go. Got your prezo.
All right. So for troubleshooting, there are several options for testing. Most of them are browser based, but there are some add-ons that I found useful. One of them is called SAML Tracer, and this is a browser extension that will capture the URL request, the headers, and present them in a browser window so that you can see exactly what's going on. It will give you, for requests that have SAML requests and responses, you'll get a new tab that says SAML, and you can then inspect the XML directly from the browser that in the response that you're getting. You can also use the browser developer tools to look at the requests and the responses. It does, last time I checked, it did not include a mechanism to decode the SAML requests within the HTTPS request. But there are external sites that you could use. I, take that with a, with some caution because you're posting potential things that are credentials into external websites. So, you kind of pick your poison there as to which one you want to use. You trust a browser extension, or do you trust an external site, or do you do it manually within some other editor or text tool or something like that. Go back. So the primary keys to documentation is just within our own documentation, Checkpoint's own documentation guide. And so that's where I started when I was trying to curious on how we actually did this, because while we do provide documentation, some of it is not necessarily as detailed as say somebody, if you're not familiar with SAML or how to set this up, it's not as detailed as as one would like. So let me show a troubleshooting really quickly. Let me go back to my desktop and show kind of what I'm talking about with the SAML tracer, and so that you can see what's going on in the request and the response, and why I feel the extension is probably the easiest way to get the to kind of see what's going on. So let me talk fast, because I think I'm running up against time here, Rob.
No problem. We're recorded.
New share desktop. Okay, hopefully you see my desktop again.
Yep, we got you.
All right. So I have the SAML tracer extension. It's a third-party utility. It's not anything Checkpoint official or anything like that. It is simply just a browser extension that watches the inspection requests. And you can see this in Chrome. You can see it in Firefox. You can see it in Edge, and other third-party browsers that may support those extensions. You can see what's, just the requests that are going on the browser. So it is configured per, is it per tab? I think it's per tab. So let me close some of these. Let me leave that admin portal open. See if we can't fix that. Sorry about that. Forgot to mute my phone. So I'm going to open up a new tab. Going to go to portal.checkpoint.com. And I'm going to sign out, because apparently it still kept me logged in. Let's open that over here. I'm going to open up my SAML tracer again. And I'm going to log in with my jump cloud. So hopefully this will be capturing. All right, good. It is capturing everything that I want to see here. All right, so you can see within SAML tracer, there's a SAML, and maybe you can't, because I don't know how big this is on your screen.
Yeah, it's pretty small, but if people don't know Zoom, you can zoom in on the screen there. Oh, perfect. That works.
All right, so you'll see the flags that have a SAML requests and responses are actually flagged here. And so let me pause so it'll quit scrolling. So the first request is a get to SSO jump cloud, to my SSO application within jump cloud. And then if you look at the SAML request, it's pretty basic. It's, it gives you, here's my destination. That's where I'm redirecting to. Here's who I am and who you need to respond to. So the request is pretty simple. It includes the entity ID that the wizard gives you at first, when you first create the identity provider connection. So that's the least interesting. I mean, that's the least interesting piece when it comes to the SAML. The request is pretty straightforward. Response, however, gives you a ton of XML information about, here's the redirect site. Here's time. Oh, and if your times are wrong, way off on, say, your laptop or whatever, you're gonna have a bad day. It's not gonna, you're gonna have some issues. So if you find you're running issues and it looks like you're seeing seeing the proper groups, the proper assertions being delivered back to the Infinity portal, just make sure the date and time on your request is right, on your laptop is correct. Because I actually had that issue once as well. The issuer is the response, is who we are. And you scroll down and it gives you all of these signature information about, the SSO application, all of this encryption, certificates, everything that that should verify the requester is who they say they are. You don't necessarily care about that just yet, but you keep going further down. And what you really want to look at is the SAML assertion section. And that's where you will begin to see, the important things. Here's your issuer. Same again, we see it again. And then I have a name ID. I've got my email address. So I'm sending that back correctly. And then I come down a little bit further and I find the attributes. So in this instance, I have an attribute value. And you can see endpoint admins. But you come back up here to names. So groups, I'm in the endpoint admins group. Now I think I know what the problem is, but just to continue on, if I go down, I will see I'm passing a given name, just as expected. If I go back to that box for the identity provider back here, and I look at allow connectivity, you will see I need to be sending given name, email address, groups, and then this XML or this SAML attribute here. Where'd it go? Right here. So I'm sending my given name. I'm sending this SAML assertion value here, and that's my user ID. That's email address. I'm sending a last name. And that's it. It looks like I'm sending 1, 2, 3. It looks like I'm sending all of the values I'm supposed to. So in this case, I believe what I'm missing is if I come back here to my user groups and I find that endpoint admins group that I created, I have an extra slash here for a path. So if I take this path out, I think that will get me into, oh, one other thing I should point out. If you don't assign a role, a service, then you're going to have a bad day too. So you can define whether or not the users are going to be an admin, primary admin, give specific accounts or nothing. Or in this case, like if I wanted to add security management, I could add read only, for example, for security management, but I don't want to do that in this instance. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to fix my path, although it still says I have security admin here. And I don't know how to clear that, so I'll just leave that be. So coming back here to the identity and access, I'm going to do another request. And we're going to try this again. Now that I've changed the group path. The path is important. When I first started trying to learn this, nope, wrong one. It took me a while to realize that I needed to send the path. Okay, so I fixed my issue. I'm now logging into the endpoint portal. And if I come down and look at that, it did not capture that tab. So, but using that account that I could not log in for previously, I am now able to log into my endpoint piece. And if I go to security management, it still says I have admin permissions, so I've got to fix that. But But that's it. Rob, that's really all I've got at the moment. Do we have any questions?
We do. Uh, First one should be, I mean, you answered a couple of them through there, so for time, I will skip those that were already covered, but um, are they, show the list of IDP providers that are uh, available. If somebody has another one, are more being added? Can we request other ones being added? How does that happen?
So you can, let me stop my share. Actually, I don't need to stop my share. Let me copy this link. And that's going to open up here. I don't know if you can see this, but
Yeah, we can see that. Yep.
okay. So you can request that typically requires an RFE through your SE um, to to kind of include those, and then R&D will prioritize that however they choose. Many times, at what point in time when I first started looking at this, I think there was like ping identity. We had two pings options, but one of them wasn't supported. So I had to go through the process and test with ping. And I was able to use a generic SAML server with it. And then, like another month or two later, when I went back to try to redo it to do a demo for some other folks, it was supported. So so they're adding identity providers fairly. I mean, I don't know how regularly, but they are adding them, and they seem to be able to do it relatively. I don't know, relatively simple is the word, but they will add them as needed, and an RFE is the best way to go
Right,
and ask for that.
right. Does this integrate with user center account or is it only for the Infinity account login?
This is just for Infinity Portal. I don't know. Yeah, I've actually had a customer ask about that previously, if we could do some kind of third party authentication with like user center and things like that. But to my knowledge, that's not an option.
Okay. Once SSO is set up, do I ever need to admin users or groups in Infinity Portal, or does it only happen in IDP?
So you will have to add the the group definition. So similar to other things like TACAX or Radius, in this instance, I had to add the group and the permission. So I don't think that we have a mechanism to like receive group definitions and permission levels from the IDP. We will define the roles in the user group and the ID in this case. And then once that is done, you don't have to add any users. So I didn't add any members to this group. All I did was make sure that I configured the right path, and then on the IDP side, I made sure I was a member of the proper group there. So it sends the group information, and as long as you have a matching role and matching group here configured in Infinity Portal, you'll receive those permissions.
Got it. And I think I have one more here. What is the best way to start configuring SAML if you are just starting out?
um, I don't know that I have a good answer for that. So I guess it depends on what your from a customer perspective, kind of what your goals are for providing authentication to external services. I started looking at this because it I was curious. I wanted to know, a little bit more about SAML, a little more about single sign-on. And so I started playing around with Keycloak in my lab. And because I have access to Infinity Portal, it was fairly straightforward for me to have a kind of a test playground to be able to learn. It's for example, when I used Jump Cloud, it was very straightforward and very easy compared to what I had the learning curve I had to go through to configure Keycloak, for example. So if you're trying to integrate with external cloud services, and or you already have that configured, then it makes for better user management. Just for me thinking, you have control over your users. within your, your environment. And all you do is define them off of define their role within Infinity Portal.
Right.
I don't know that that really answers the answer.
Right. I mean, it's, yeah, your mileage may vary is the answer.
Yeah.
Right? So, talk to your SE, if they don't have the deep knowledge like Michael has, we'll get the right person. We have plenty of resources here that can help you out. So just let us know and reach out to us directly too. I think that covers it, Mike. Thanks again. Great information. We will send that follow-up email with any reference content and the recording link. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks. You'll see the invitation for that soon. With that, thanks again for joining. We'll see you here next time. Thank you, Mike. And thank you all. Enjoy your day. See ya.